Hello, welcome back to the Happy Homestead, and today we are canning tomatoes. We're going to do the raw pack method, and we're not adding any water. We're just using the tomatoes by themselves. We're going to put them in the boiling water for 30 to 60 seconds, and then we're going to put them in a cold ice water bath to stop the cooking. We just want to get the skins off. And after I'm done with that, I'll show you what we do next. I usually do about 3 at a time so that I don't accidentally lose track of who all's in there and how long they've been in there and overcook some and undercook others. So that's how I like to do it. And if they're trying to float, which these are doing really well, but sometimes they want to float, you can force them down in the water. Some varieties of tomatoes are worse than others about that. These are doing nicely. These are early girls. I'm going to take them, put them in here, and then I will repeat the process. Oh good, this one's skin already started to split. I'll just keep doing that, and then when I'm done, we'll show you what we do next. Okay, we're back, and I took the boiling water off of the burner, and we have tomatoes here and here, and we're going to start peeling and coring, and we will be putting them in these jars. You can do pints or quarts or whatever size you prefer for different recipes. And these are ball pint jars that I use here, and I have my lids and my bands that go with the lids. And since we'll be boiling the tomatoes in the hot water bath for 85 minutes, we don't have to, according to Ball, we don't have to pre-sterilize these jars, because they're going to, everything that could possibly be in here will get killed in that 85 minutes. That's a very long water bath time. So we can just cut our tomatoes. We have some bad spots. I'm not having a good year with tomatoes. I'm in Ohio, and it rained and rained and rained and was cold, and then it rained and rained and was hot and humid. So I've got some different issues. This one looks pretty good, but I do have some that had blight and had anthracnose, which those are bacteria and fungus diseases. Somebody nibbled on a couple of these, and then a few got sun scald, which is like sunburn for tomatoes, and that's because there weren't enough leaves to keep them from getting sunburned. I'm losing a lot of my leaves on my plants, but we're still going to try to do our best with what we've been given, and we will preserve what we have, and we'll just cut out any bad spots there might be, and we'll put the tomatoes in, and then I'll show you in a few minutes, once I've put the tomatoes in, I'll show you what else we need to do before we put them in the water bath. We will core these, and the skin should be pretty easy to peel off since they were in the bath, the hot bath and the cold bath. That makes the skins come off easily. That way you don't use your knife to peel. And this is pretty good. There's a bad spot here. I'm going to cut it out. If you have a bad spot, You may wish to sniff your tomato. Make sure it wasn't like a really rotten spot. Now, some of these will fit in whole. Some of them you may have to cut in half. Sometimes I do Brandywines or plum tomatoes, and different sizes you may have to cut in half, or you can leave whole. Just depends, because you can only, fit it through that jar. If it's a Brandywine tomato or something that's really large, you may have to cut it in half. So just finish peeling this. This had a little sun scald up top. I will cut this off. This part, there's nothing wrong with it. It just would be a little not as flavorful. You can start to push them down in. The juices will flow. And we want to get these filled with juices, and if there's any air bubbles, we'll get air bubbles out. Just rotating the jar. We can use a knife or a spoon to push the air bubbles out if needed. This one has a belly button. So I'm going to cut that little rough part off because the way the fruit formed, there's actually some skin down in there. That happens sometimes. This one's a larger tomato. So I will cut it in half. And push, and you see juices starting to come out of the tomatoes. I'm not seeing any air bubbles down in there at the bottom, so that's good. If I get air bubbles, I'll stop and use a spoon or a knife to push them out. We have a little bit of a core left here. I had this bad spot. Smells good. I'm just going to cut this little bit of core out because that's tough. We don't want that later in our soups or stews, or if we make tomato soup or spaghetti sauce or something later on. We don't want that woody part in with it. That wouldn't taste good. Unless you really like a lot of extra fiber, I suppose. And we want to try to get these cut side down usually. You see more juices coming out. And let me consult my book here. I never can remember if it's a half or a whole inch of headspace. It's a half inch of headspace. So when we end up with, we're about at an inch right now. We're going to leave it like that for right now, and I'll tell you why later. I'm going to finish filling these jars, and then we'll be back, and I'll show you what we do next before they go in the canning bath. Okay, so I have filled my jars with my tomatoes, and the next important step is to wipe the rims of these jars. Putting the tomatoes in can be a little messy, and you don't want all this tomato all over everything. You won't get a good seal when you put your lid on. It can cause problems, and you don't want to mess with your seal because you'll have wasted product. The next thing we're going to do, Ball says that we need to add lemon juice because we have bred a lot of the acid out of our tomatoes in the past 100 years or so. And so we need to add acid back to make this safe for storage and using the water bath method. So this will keep bad bacteria such as what causes botulism and other types of food poisoning. It'll keep those bacteria from growing because they do not like acid. So we're going to add 1 tablespoon of lemon juice per pint. This will add a little extra liquid in here, and that's why I don't take it all the way to a 1/2 inch with the tomatoes. I do about 1 to 3/4 inch headspace because I know I'm going to be adding this extra liquid, and that will take it up to about a 1/2. Then this is optional. You can, if you don't want to use lemon juice, they have citric acid. A lot of canning uses citric acid powder. You can add that, that's fine. That also makes it acidic. I like to add salt. It's an optional thing, but I'm usually going to be using this in soups anyways, and I don't need to watch my salt content. So for pints, we use a 1/2 teaspoon. If you're doing quarts of whole tomatoes, you want to do 2 tablespoons of lemon juice and 1 teaspoon on the salt. That's the suggestion that Ball has per their canning book. Doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to be about the right amount. And you'll end up adding less salt in your soup recipe anyway, or your chili recipe. Just having the salt here, salt in the broth you use, then you don't need to add extra salt in your soup. So we've cleaned the lids. We've made sure there's no cracks or chips because that could affect our seal. Then we're going to add our lids. And we're going to screw them on fingertip tight. You don't want to crank down really hard. That won't allow the air to come out that needs to come out to form the vacuum. So I have 4 pints this time. I can fit up to 7 in my canner. I have hot water ready to go in the canner. I added some vinegar because I have hard water. I live in Southwest Ohio and I have hard water because of the limestone here. If you don't add the vinegar, your jars will be very chalky with calcium when they come out of your water bath. So I have my jar lifter here. Going to place my jars in, and you want to make sure that the water is at least 1 inch, preferably 2 inches above the top of the jar, especially since there will be a long water bath time. We don't want to run out of water while it's boiling. It needs to stay at that boiling temperature for the 85 minutes. I'm going to put the lid on and crank the heat up, and I'll show you the finished product when it is completed. We want to make sure that it's actually boiling before we start our timer. That means steam should be seen coming out of the lid here on one of the sides. Once you see the steam coming out, you can start your timer, and you may want to use your fan to pull the moisture out so it doesn't condense all over the top of your stove. And we will be back when we are done. Okay, we're back and we boiled our jars for 85 minutes and I let them cool on a different burner here for about 40 minutes. The book says you can just do 5 minutes and then take out of the water bath, but I have found that when that happens, the jars trying to create their seal leak liquid out, and we don't want that. So I let them cool off extra. Now I'm going to use my jar lifter and pull them out. I don't see any liquid leaking out. You can usually hear it oozing out if that happens, and you'd want to put it back in the water and let it finish cooling a little longer because we don't want to lose our liquid. So I'll pull these out and they should start to seal. Some of them may have already sealed. Looks like this one has sealed. And we'll get the rest of these out. This one is sealed. So 2 of the 4 have already sealed. The other 2 will probably seal in the next 20 minutes or so. You will notice that the tomatoes are floating at the top. This is common with raw pack. When you do raw pack tomatoes and peaches as well, it's because of all the air bubbles that's naturally in the spaces of the fruit. Over time, they will start to get the liquid into the fruit itself, and then they will settle down to the bottom and they will rest like they should. This shouldn't affect the sealing of the jars. You'll just notice that for now they'll be floating. And that's all there is. You want them to cool about 24 hours before you remove the bands, and then you can label them and store them. And you want to make sure you store them in a place that doesn't get too hot and doesn't have a lot of sunlight. Canned goods do better if they're in a cooler place, darker, and not exposed to bright sunlight. They'll last longer that way. And that's our pints of tomatoes, and we will probably use those for soups or chilies over the winter. Thank you for watching.